Welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host J.R. Stewart.
And good evening, everyone. I'm your co-host Tommy Duncan. Welcome.
Welcome. Big shout out to Liquid for providing our theme music. And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share information about our channel. Not necessarily in that order, but make sure you do all three. So, Tom, what exciting topic do we have for tonight? For
For tonight, we are rounding out. We are almost at the end of March, which, of course, as we are aware of, is Women's History Month. And our topic for today is the power of the Black woman. Our topic for tonight is the power of the Black woman. We have about a week-ish left, and we've already celebrated some of the greatest historical figures in American history. Black women in particular, the likes of which the world has never seen. But we
right.
want to talk about the power behind Black women and Black womanhood in America as well as we celebrate, historically speaking, how we get things done.
Well, Tom, there is a saying that besides every great man, there's a great woman, and I mean there is something to that. At least there used to be something to that. Now I'm starting to lose faith and confidence that there are. I don't know that the process is going to produce any greatness at the way things are going now. So, and I know we differ on the on what that process is and how it produces great people. But we can jump into that, and you think I'm a little heavy-handed when it comes to blaming responsibility on the women, but I disagree there. But let's
I got
jump
you.
on into it. The power
And
of the
and,
black
and, and
woman.
and before we do get started, we need to make sure that we invite people to text. If they have anything that they'd like to contribute during our conversation, make sure that's available, Jimmy. And also, we
Yes,
need to socialize our number if anyone would like to call in. And Jimmy, what is that number again?
it is 972-497-2280. It's on the screen here. Yeah, go ahead and call if you want to join in the conversation. So
And what is that number again? 972.
497-2280.
All right, folks.
And so we're
So,
here every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. And this is a talk show where we welcome outside conversation and opinions.
absolutely, absolutely, Jimmy. So, I mean, one of the things that we have to discuss and we sometimes have to acknowledge is that this is a country. We're talking about the United States that was built on the foundation of privilege and wealth for white men. There's no misunderstanding about that. There's no confusion about that. We understand how this country was founded. When we look at the last 450, 500 some odd years from some of the so-called earliest settlers of this country who found a country full of people that we know as the Arawaks or the indigenous people, the American Indians, to now we understand that some of the greatest movements in this country, even though a lot of time being acknowledged as being led by men, when it came down to getting things done, when it came down to some of the greatest movements in our history, especially within our community, quite frankly, without some of the great sheroes Even to this day, Jimmy, they just wouldn't have happened. Whether we talk about civil rights, whether we talk about voting rights, whether we talking about abolitionists, whether we talking about being able to rescue some of our folks from some of our ancestors from slavery, whether that was getting out of the South to the North or going to Canada, just you can't really name a major movement, in my opinion, in America without strong, proud, intelligent, strategic black women who may not have gotten the credit that they deserved, but were surely heavily involved and really were strategic in every major movement that we've had in this country.
And Tom, I agree with most of what you said, and so I don't think we need to kind of go back and forth on that. So where we slightly disagree is all of those things that you talked about were centered in a spiritual movement. There was a strong sense of right and wrong. There were defined roles that where people knew they had to play their part. The inspiration for a lot of those movements came on the strength of black women. So we agree there. Um, my only concern is that that which was in the past is gone now. That there will not be any more great movements. There won't be any other great people to come out of those movements because the very thing that caused them to be great, which was the spirituality, is lost today. What say you?
It depends on how you're defining that, Jimmy. When you say there will be no great movements, there are great movements going on right now as we speak and out as we breathe that are centered around black women. Our entire existence, Jimmy, and when I say our, I mean our people, our ancestors, has been the fight and the struggle for freedom, for dignity, for opportunity, and for parity. Being able to live out the truths that this country, so called, was built on. And also an understanding that there are folks who built that power, who has systematically tried to disenfranchise other people from having the power and what they call the inalienable rights that the country was built upon. So it depends on what kind of story you're trying to tell and what
Okay,
narrative you're speaking.
so Tom, you tend to focus a lot more on other people and what their motivation is and why they do certain things, and really, that is
What
not
I no
the
what I'm saying is our fight has been for freedom since we have been here because we are the only group of people who have come to America in mass involuntarily to build
Tom.
this country for somebody else.
The fight that you're talking about has been a secondary, tertiary fight at best. So the true fight for any person or group of people is the fight from within to be the best version of yourself that you can be and hopefully live the kind of life where you can inspire others. Movements come out of and they're centered around inspiration of someone or a small group of nucleus inspiring a larger group. But you can only do that, Tom, when you have a force within you that's inspiring. And what I'm trying to convey to you is that the heart of those movements have come from black women. But those movements that's because those black women were spiritually grounded and centered and could withstand the very forces that you're talking about. And so the point is that that doesn't exist today. The spirituality
Wait,
aspect.
back up. So
Go
what
ahead.
you're telling me is that black women
Hmm.
today are not spiritually grounded. Period.
That's
Is that what you're saying?
that's what I'm saying in mass.
Where,
Yes.
where, where is your evidence that black women in the United States of America are not spiritually grounded? Now, we're not talking about an individual or we're not talking about a group, but you're saying that black women in general are not spiritually grounded. Help me understand. Well, before we get to that, the topic of today's discussion is the power of black women in America.
Right.
Whether we're talking about
And
today,
that and
whether we're
that
talking about historical
that's right.
figures. So,
But
and
that
so
power, Tom, comes from a spiritual sense and alignment with God. That's the point I'm trying to make. You lose that, then the very power that you once had is gone. And so we can kind of bounce around that. I know you tend to focus more on the external forces. of what other people are doing, and that you think that is the fight. But for us, the true salvation is we have to get back to being in sync with God. We need to get back to being a spiritual people. A godly people could not have withstood the whole civil rights movement. Could not have withstood the assault on us by the Klan and by white racism. The all the various laws that were designed to keep us down. We could not have overcome all that time if we didn't have a strong sense that God was with us. And God was with us because He was working on these various movements and driving His will through black women who help keep those movements going afloat. You take that connection from God away, and Tom, you're not going to inspire anyone to get up and do anything. And that's where we find ourselves today.
I don't understand where you're coming from. And when I say I don't understand where you're coming from, I understand what you're saying. But what you're saying is we've lost our way and that we are not spiritually grounded. Correct?
What I'm saying is that the process of inspiration is gone. Yes, that fuel these movements that you're talking about. You're not going to motivate anyone today. There will never be another civil rights movement, for instance, for black folks to come together the way they did during the 40s, 50s, and 60s to help transform America. Transformation of America today by the left is the cancer culture. It's the LBGTQ and whatever other letters they throw in movements. It is
The
about
LGBTQ is not a movement centered around
I will.
the black
It's not.
community.
Well, no,
The
I'm just talking.
LGBTQ is not a
Tom,
movement centered
I'm
around
not
black people.
saying it is centered around us, and what I'm saying is that
Well,
it's a
that's what you
movement.
brought up.
No, I'm saying it's a movement. But
It
I'm saying
is.
I'm
There,
saying
there are a ton of movements
I'm
out
saying that there will not be any more black movements like either those currently today or the ones historically that have driven black people in the past because we don't have that connection, that spiritual connection that drove and fueled those movements. That doesn't exist today. What you have today is a hip hop culture. You have folks I don't know all of the various dances. That they do today. We've talked about some of them, the attitudes of young people. This is where the black culture is headed today. There are no more Dr. Kings. There are no more Malcolm X's. There's no more Marcus Garvey. There are no more great women who inspired these men and stood behind them, stood with them when times were tough to keep them motivated to keep inspiring. All that's gone, Tom. There is no Harriet Tubman to rescue you off the plantation. People stuck in poverty in these poverty plantations now are just stuck. There is no North Star to guide you out of the slavery South and get you to freedom. Those days are all gone, Tom, and they will never come back because all those things, every last one of them, every ounce morsel in the history of black people overcoming these things that you talked about, they all overcame those things because they were centered and grounded in God. You lose that connection. The churches today don't talk about what God really wants you to do. They talk about your salvation in a way to keep money going coming into the church. They are centered around money. They preach around money. And rather than preach the truth of what God really wants you to do in life, they just simply want to make you feel good to keep the money coming in. So, with that being said, if you look at the landscape today, it is a sad statement that our ancestors, if they were to look down on this situation, they would really wonder if their sacrifice was in vain to see where we ended up.
Jimmy, what you have to understand is what is going to happen, what is happening today and what is going to happen tomorrow is not going to look like what it looked like 50 or 60 years ago, much less what it looked like 100 years ago when our ancestors were freed from slavery. That movement didn't look like the movement during the civil rights era of the 1950s and 1960s, which isn't going to particularly have the same look in the 20 teens and the 2020s. And so you're right. It's not going to look like it looked back in, but the baton has been passed. The climate creates the times, and that is what creates the leadership to match the times. At the end of the, I mean, African people have never been a people who have sat, I mean, yes, we have been assaulted. We have been raped, literally. We have been economically disenfranchised. But depending on what was needed at the times, that is where your leadership comes from. It's not going to look like it looked like in the 1960s. But we have movements, whether you want to talk about left or right, at the end of the day, suffrage from slavery,
Tom,
1800s.
what
Civil
movement?
rights,
What movement?
voting rights.
What movement do we have today?
Jimmy, right now, it's not about the rights to vote. It's not about the rights to be citizens. Jimmy,
Once again,
you and I both understand.
You
Jimmy.
say there are movements. I'm asking you now. You tiptoeing around and just name a
No,
movement. Name some movements. That's what I'm asking. What movements?
the right to live, economic rights, which is where we were going when, of course, Dr. King and Malcolm X were both taken out because they were transitioning the movement from civil rights to civil rights. And when they started transitioning the movement from civil rights to civil rights, that's when they were assassinated.
And once
the baton
again,
is being
Tom,
passed, Jimmy.
those
And we
men.
gotta tell you, if you don't have economic power,
If
in
you
the
were to
United
go
States
back
today,
in time,
you
in the
don't have
time,
anything.
if you were to go back in time, Tom, in the Wayback Machine, and go talk to Dr. King or Malcolm X or anyone back then, and you were to tell them, 50 years from now, the black community would command upwards of $1.6 trillion in this country, and that they would, as a spending block, could easily be the eighth or ninth largest country in the world. They would say that that was a fanciful thought and that was a pipe dream. And my brother, if we could get there, that would be great. But no one would believe you. Tom, I don't know what economic fight we're talking about. We have the money to
Jimmy,
free ourselves.
Jimmy, what I'm trying to suggest, Jimmy, is that true or not true, access to capital is king. If you don't have access to capital, you're not going anyplace.
Okay, once again, Tom, with everything being online, when you go to apply for a home, it used to be you had to go into a mortgage company, go into a bank. You had to sit there in front of a loan officer, be scrutinized. That person had the ability to throw your file in the trash if they wanted to, just based on your skin color. Those type of transactions aren't done today. They're done online. People don't get to see who you are. They don't know what color you are. They don't even. You're not even allowed on financial documents to even ask for a person's race, other than possibly having your name give you away by being called Shaquila or Shaka something or named after some car like Porsche or Mercedes. That may be the only thing to give you away, but the economics that you're talking about, Tom, are just a lack of us not wanting to do business with each other. It has nothing to do with external forces. There are no white people out there. There's no boogeyman stopping us from doing what we know we're supposed to do. We just don't do it, Tom. I mean,
Jimmy, I have to disagree with you. And again,
okay,
the
then
topic,
name me the
Jimmy,
force.
Jimmy,
The topic is about black women. Yes.
The topic of tonight is the power of black women.
And I
Whether
submit
we're
to you
talking today,
that power
but-
that existed is gone. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It's gone. And so I know you don't want to believe that,
Jimmy,
but it is absolutely
Jimmy,
gone.
You're delusional.
I'm not, Tom.
Jimmy, if we look at political rights, black women by themselves elected the president. If it were not for black women in America and the black female vote, President Trump would have been President Trump for 4 more years.
Which was a good thing.
Black women by themselves are the reason that Joe Biden is president of the United States. That's power, Jimmy. You can't say that's not power.
Okay, Tom. And if you think that is power that was exercised correctly, that's debatable.
Jimmy, we don't want to get into correctness and efficacy when it comes to politics in this country. But at the end of the day, you cannot say that, for instance, the black female vote in this America got a president elected and got one president out the White House.
Yes, Tom, and a vote for and against your own interests and your own people.
We can call it what we want. But that is an exercise of power.
And so, if that's what you're going to use as an example of power,
you asked for one example. Another example. You and I both know black women have the fastest rate of entrepreneurship growth in this country. You know that. You stated it on this show. I know that as well.
Okay, so once again, you're now talking about not a movement or the inspiration for a movement. You're talking about individual gains where you're putting.
No, I'm not talking
Hold
about it.
on, Tom.
I'm
This,
talking about a
Tom
collective group of
no,
people.
you're talking about identity politics now. So now it's black women against black men in
No,
your
it's not.
comparison.
It has no. This is not about black women
It
against
is
black.
black.
We're
Hold
talking.
on.
We're talking
Hold
about the
on.
black
Hold on.
economy, Jimmy. This
Okay,
isn't
hold
black
on,
women against
Tom.
black women. This is the black economy.
You mentioned how black women got Joe Biden elected, how black women are increased their numbers in entrepreneurship. Black women graduation rates have outpaced black.
Absolutely.
You can go across the board with identity politics and put black women
This
against
is not
black
this this
men.
this is not identity politics, Jimmy.
But the
These
the
are
point
facts.
is that we were talking about the power of the black woman, and that power centered and fueled movements. That's what we started the conversation on. And I said, and I made the statement and backed it up, that those movements would never ever happen again because those movements were centered around a spiritual righteousness. Today, everything you're talking about, getting Joe Biden elected, economic advancement for black women,
The economic output of the black community. Black women and black men are a part of the black community.
yeah, Tom, you keep telling yourself that as black men get left behind, as black women are allowed to walk through the door.
Jimmy,
So you
black
keep
men per capita, black men still make more money than black women per capita for doing the same job. How are
the
black men being left behind then? If black men are still getting paid more than black women for the same jobs.
first of all, Tom, you can talk to economists like Thomas Sowell and some others that would tell you that it's ridiculous and not true. Because if it was true, men, when you make that comparison for men in general or for black men against black women, nobody would hire.
Jimmy,
Hold on, Tom.
Jimmy, you keep saying
Nobody.
again.
Nobody would
Again,
hire nobody would hire a man if they can go out and hire a woman and pay her less for the same work. That is just not true. That's not nowhere near remotely true. There are mitigating circumstances for why some men make more than women. Some women make more than men in certain industries.
Because they're men.
No, it's not because they're men, Tom. It's
And
because
this country is run by white men.
first of all, that's Tom. That is not totally true. What you're
What
saying,
you're saying is
you're being
what you're saying-
disingenuous.
what genuine, Jimmy? You're saying that
What
this
I'm
country
saying,
is
Tom,
not
is
run
that
by
before
white men.
we throw out blanket statements like that,
Are you saying
take,
this country is not run by white men?
what I'm saying is that the income gap that you talked about
Okay.
does not exist. You know that
There is no income gap between black men and black women.
there is not for the same work.
Well,
No,
Jimmy. Okay, but okay. The fact is, there is an income gap between black men and black women.
based on education and based on the jobs that they perform. But for the same education level, for the same job, black men and black women and men and women, period, pretty much make around the same amount of money. There is no women make less money, 78 cents for every dollar that men make in this society. Because if it was true, companies would only hire. Companies move their operations
No,
overseas to cut costs.
I know that,
If
Jimmy.
you could just
But
hire women and cut 28% of your cost by just hiring women, that's all companies would do if that was the case. That is not the case across the board. Women who have to men for I mean take care of kids, who have to take off, who get take off work a lot more. Just don't have the time to work overtime to put extra hours in that a lot of men do. So those men, there are cases where men do make more money because they work longer hours, they have more time to commit to the company, they don't take off work as much. They're not the primary caretakers for children. So when children get sick, they don't have to take off from work like women do a lot of times. So those are the mitigating factors that determine how this pay thing works out. But that's not what the conversation is about. I can disprove all those
correct.
little things that you're saying.
That's
But
right.
once
We can
again,
get to
back to
Jimmy.
the
We got
power.
and
We're
as
talking
we
about the
got.
power of black
You're
women.
saying that black women have no power.
No, what I said, Tom, if you listen carefully and stop trying to rephrase my statement,
I'm just
I'm going to be
you said
very,
they,
I'm going to be
said
very
they have
clear
no power.
that
Be
the
clear.
power to inspire, the power to drive movements, is gone for black women. That is what I said. Not to say that they don't have any power; they do have some. I disagree with you on how that power is used. To say that it's not used for good, But if they want
It
to
doesn't
use,
matter.
but if
It's
you
power.
want to use your power for the
How has black
to
women's power
carry
been
out
used for
the
bad?
to carry out the mission of the devil, then go for it and pat
Wait,
yourself on
wait,
the
wait, wait,
back
wait, wait, wait,
that you
wait.
have
Back up,
power.
back up, back up, back up. You just
Yes,
said used for the devil. How is the power of black woman used for the devil?
because it's not used for good as defined
Okay, what is
by
it that
the
black women are doing collectively that is being used for the devil collectively?
Tom, the fact that you have more of a role reversal. The Bible talks quite heavily. There are two things in the New Testament, if you pay attention, like I do, to these things. I'm not a preacher or anything, but I do study it just for to give me something else to think about. But there are two things that are common in theme here. One, being rewarded for the good work, and two, that being rewarded for good work. There's no three things. There's no separation between men and women in the body of the church, but also that you have different roles and responsibility that are clearly defined. When you go against those roles, you are not doing the work of God at that point because the roles are very important. There wouldn't have been the emphasis on these roles if it wasn't the case. So when you read these things, you have to pay attention to the audience of who they're writing for and to, and what the message is. And the message is very clear: that God works through women to affect the souls of men. That's a process now defined in the New Testament. And so the spirit that we were talking about, the nature and the power of women, black women especially, for these movements that you so eloquently talked about, were driven by women who were very grounded with God, were very in sync with God. So it was easy to work through them to affect the hearts of men to drive these movements. Without that, men are just knuckleheads. They'll go off and create war. They'll go do all kind of crazy stuff. God knows this. God gave up on that process.
War has never stopped, Jimmy. In
Tom,
some places,
you're
war has
not.
never
It's
stopped.
not about war. You're not listening to me. What I'm saying to you is that God gave up on that process of trying to inspire and motivate men long time ago. That's the whole New Testament. If you really pay attention to the essence of the New Testament, people think it was just about salvation and about believing in Christ to get into heaven. That's really not the emphasis of the New Testament. The emphasis of the New Testament was a shift away from God trying to inspire men do by having direct contact with Moses and David and all the men and prophets of the Old Testament to a new methodology of working through women to affect the soul and the hearts of men to get them to do the right thing. This is why the Bible was not really concerned about men not being in the Word, because as long as you had a good woman in your life who was in the Word, God could work through her to what? Get to you, to get you into the word. That process, Tom, is what you're not paying attention to, has been lost. That is why there won't be any more great movements from black people going forward, because the black woman is no longer in that role where she's carrying out that functionality.
How do you
So
define a great movement, Jimmy? So I'll understand.
all the movements you talked about, Tom, the civil rights movement, the fights against Jim Crow laws, the rights for equality, to rights to vote, the rights to just exercise your right as a person in this country. So all those movements, all those people coming together, inspired to do the right thing, putting their bodies on the line, their money on the line, their lives on the line, their time by being incarcerated, their jobs a lot of times. All that with people were willing to sacrifice all those things, Tom, because they believed in a greater sense of and purpose. That is gone today. That would never ever happen again for black people. The most you're going to have now is the me society looking out for me. So you're right. Black women will continue to, thrive in this country because they are less threatening than black men. Black men will continue to catch hell, but there won't be any movements to rescue black men out of the hell that we find ourselves in, because there won't be any movements, period. It's only going to be about these isolated cases where a few black women are doing well for themselves, and we're going to pat ourselves on the back for at least them making some progress. That's all you're going to get today, Tom. And if you call that
Okay.
power, and I guess it can be construed as power, but it's not the power that black women once had when they could drive entire movements, drive millions of people to go fight for what was right. That's not the case today, Tom.
Jimmy, if we talk about, one of the movements that is front and center today, and we're talking about the movement to neutralize what we know and is now called white supremacy in America, which has systematically been used for centuries now in order to minimize and or destroy the black family and the black community and the existence, ideally speaking, of black people in America, Jimmy. If we don't think of that in terms of the fight against white supremacy as a movement, and black women are front and center
You know what,
in
Tom? That is a fool's
that
errand.
movement.
That is a
Jimmy,
that is a fool's errand, Tom. Because here's why. First of all, what is white supremacy? There is no white person alive on this planet that could be superior to me. My
I'm not
mind.
talking about.
Hold on, Tom.
I'm not talking about an
Hold
individual,
on,
Jimmy.
Tom.
I'm
Hold on,
talking about
Tom.
the institution. I'm talking about. I'm
What
not.
institution?
We're
What?
not. We're not talking about individually.
Okay, then if we're
We-
not, but individuals, Tom, is where your rights for God come from. You individually have rights from God. Then they don't. God don't just bestow them on a group to be parceled out and be controlled by a group. He gave them to you individually, Tom.
We're
So
not. We're not even having a conversation about this.
so
If we're talking about
so you talk
if,
about
if
you
we're
talk
talking about
about
an
white
individual,
Tom.
if we're talking about an interaction of individual as the individual, we're
I
not
may
even having a conversation about
I
this.
may
It wouldn't
I
even
may
be relevant
I
if we were
may
talking about
you
individual.
Tom, you
Jimmy.
brought
It
it
wouldn't
up.
even be
You
relevant.
brought
I
up
know
white
that,
supremacy.
but it is not an individual contest, Jimmy.
Tom, okay, you can call it what you want, but white supremacy only exists in the minds of people. And so, if you're foolish enough
Oh,
to
it
believe,
just it just came from no place.
well,
It just
you know what?
it just came
If
from
you are
nowhere. And then
foolish
everybody,
enough, if you are foolish enough to believe that your skin color makes you superior to someone, then be foolish that way. That doesn't concern me. I don't deal with foolish people.
Jimmy,
You know.
Jimmy, I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of the concept of
So
because
we're going to waste our time
there are a
dealing with
collect.
foolish people, is what you're saying. So the
Jimmy,
true problem.
what I'm telling you though, Jimmy, is that that foolishness has real consequences in a courtroom. That foolishness has real consequences on the street. That foolishness has consequences when it comes to people's lives every day. That's what I'm saying.
You know what, Tom? That boogeyman only exists in the minds of people. So if you believe that white people are superior, then
No,
yeah,
no, 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 no. I never said that. I never said that
if
white
you
people are
believe in white
superior. What I'm
supremacy,
saying is,
if you
white,
believe white supremacy has some power over you, then it will. I
Jimmy,
don't. It has no
what,
power over me whatsoever. In the streets, in the courts, in my job, in my business, as I go through life, white supremacy has no factor in my life whatsoever. Why? Because
okay, well,
people who think that way and engage that way have no control over me, Tom. And I don't deal with them. I don't deal with foolish people. Why waste my time trying to deal with the heart of a stupid person? And you're going to tell me that somehow we're
Jimmy,
supposed to have a
so
movement?
what you're saying is that, and again, okay, so we're a little bit over 30 minutes, but we have a little bit more time here. But
Yes, we do. We take all the time we like. It's our show.
if we think that with everything, your brilliance, my brilliance,
Yes.
and you think that if we just all of a sudden with that same brilliance, our skin happened to look like this, not like this, it wouldn't make a difference.
We're not, Tom.
Same brilliance.
We're not. What difference is it going to make these days? Yeah, poor
Op-
people. Yeah,
op-
white people
oppor-
catching hell also.
it's called opportunity, Jimmy. It's
Okay,
called
Tom.
opportunity.
And whatever exists in the minds and hearts of people, you're not going to legislate that out of them, and
I know that. I know that.
you're not gonna guilt them out
I
of it.
know that.
So
I know
what
that.
what
I
is
know
that
that.
you?
I'm very clear.
Okay, so what is
But
that
that,
you
does,
think,
but that doesn't mean that it's not relevant, Jimmy. That doesn't
Tom?
mean it's not a fight. It doesn't mean that, Jimmy, if you go into a store, if you are in an elevator at a hotel at some place and you can't legislate some woman getting afraid because you come into there, you're intelligent, you know, you ain't a skinny brother, and you go into a elevator and some woman gets intimidated just because you are black. That is not that woman imagining that. That is programmed behavior. And I'm not saying
And you
that
know
you're going to
what?
change. I'm not saying you're going to change that in that woman.
And that is
So
her problem.
I understand that is
That
her
wouldn't
problem.
concern me one iota.
I understand that, Jimmy, but this is the difference. When your cousin or your niece or nephew gets stopped by a law enforcement officer, it does make a difference depending on what they look like
You
and their
know what?
livelihood. and where they end up.
It
That makes
makes
a that
it
makes a
makes
real difference,
it
Jimmy.
makes no
And
difference, Tom.
you cannot, Jimmy. That's not true.
It makes no
Jimmy,
difference,
you may
Tom.
not be able to legislate what that law enforcement officer feels, but it may
It
make a
makes
difference
no
in the
difference,
life
Tom.
of your son
What makes
or
a
your daughter.
difference? If you look at the studies, Tom, every study has concluded the same thing: that color and race has no bearing on the outcome. We know what has a bearing, what has an outcome on how you interact with the law enforcement: your behavior, your responses, how you treat them. If you let things escalate to the point where they pull a gun out because they feel a threat, really bad things are getting ready to happen at that point. And for people who don't let it escalate, regardless of color, come out of those. Tom, you're talking about 10 million interactions a year between law enforcement and the public. 10 million. And we're talking about 1,000 cases where deadly force is used. And the number of those cases out of that 1,000, you're talking about less than 100 dealing with black people, and only about 30 or 40 dealing with black men. So
And it's,
out of 10 million, Tom, 10 million interactions with the public every year. Now we're talking really in the last couple of years, since so much attention has been brought to it, where law enforcement don't even want to deal with black people sometimes. They do their best to avoid it. You're really talking about 8 to 12 cases of deadly force against black men by law enforcement out of 10 million interactions. Tom, statistically, that's zero when you
and
do the
Jimmy,
math on it.
and it's just coincidental that 40% of our prisons are filled with black men. That's just coincidental. It has nothing to do with their color.
How,
It's just
how, how
coincidental
about
that
how about
40% of
Tom?
black men
How
are
about
in
Tom?
our
Those
prisons.
prisons are filled with people who commit crimes. That
And you know
that
what?
is never ever factored in.
Jimmy, statistically speaking, we know that black men and white men, statistically speaking, are committing the same crimes. It just so happens that there are a lot more black men who end up going to prison because of it.
Tom, you
And
know what?
that is statistically a
Okay.
fact.
And
That is
once
a fact.
again, Tom, I wish you would pay attention to the studies. And so what you're
I
saying,
looked at the studies.
okay, okay. Now I'm gonna let me debunk this real quickly so we can move on. Committing the same crime, yes, you have a point there. But what you don't factor
That's
in,
what I'm talking about.
let me finish, Tom. There, when you factor in the priors and the type of priors, those things add to a sentence. If you steal a car and I steal a car, if this is your first time stealing a car, you may get off with probation. You may not even do any jail time. If I steal a car, but I got a long list of priors, I'm going to jail, Tom. We committed the same crime on paper. You stole a car and I stole a car. But because I have priors, now more time is added to my. I don't get the benefit of a first time offender or a second time offender. Hell, sometimes even a third time offender. But if this is my 10th and 12th time being in there and I have other crimes I've committed, especially if a deadly weapon is involved in any kind of way with these things. And so this is what they don't tell you on CNN when they report these things. All they say is, oh, we've looked at crimes committed by blacks and whites commit the same crime. Blacks are getting more time. What they don't tell you is that in the cases where black folks get more time, they have more priors that add to that time. But anyway, we're talking about black women again, Tom. And so
I know.
you're okay with black women using whatever power they have to benefit black women.
Jimmy, I am not saying that. I'll put it this way. Let's be quite clear.
Okay.
Most black women, because they're doing the same thing that black men are doing, they're in school, they're getting an education, they're getting a job. Black women are doing what black men are doing, which is what white men are doing, which is what white men are doing. They're trying to increase the prosperity of themselves and their families.
Okay, Tom. Well, right now in America, we have a high school dropout rate for black boys that exceeds 50%. And very little effort is being made to reach back and motivate and inspire those young men to stay in school and go to college and make something of themselves. But with black girls, it's different. We raise our girls and we love our boys. And so it's okay for the black boys to fall off and fall
No,
and
who
go
said
down the
that?
wrong path.
Who said that?
So, Tom, black society is saying that when we don't make more of an
No,
effort to rescue those boys.
I've never heard anyone say that it's okay
I'm
for
saying it.
young
I'm
black
saying it
men
based
to.
on on the actions of black people. Black people are concerned about far more things, and white racism is not even something we should be concerned about. Saving our kids is something that we should be concerned about.
I'd agree with that.
You're saying making that.
No, we can agree on that.
So some movement to deal with stupid people who believe their skin color makes them superior is worthy of conversation and worthy of our
That
effort.
wasn't the topic of this conversation. The topic of this conversation was the power of black women, and then it divulged into this other conversation.
By you, Tom.
No, it was you because you
I
said black
didn't.
women have no power.
I did not say that, Tom. You keep
No,
repeating
you-
that,
Jimmy,
Tom.
you
I said they don't have the
because of
power to
infra-
inspire. Just
Exactly.
so
And
now,
so what you're saying
but you
is
pointed out
they
they
have
did
no
have
power.
no, Tom. I said no power to inspire. You said they do have power. They have voting power.
course they
have
do. They
economic
always
power.
have. They always
Okay,
will.
so Tom,
It is the nature of woman.
I did not disagree with your statement. So we both agree they have some power. I don't think they use it
Of course they
wisely.
do.
So why do you keep saying that I said they have no power when I didn't say that? I said they don't have power to inspire, is what I
They
said,
don't.
Tom.
Black women today don't have the power to inspire.
That's right. That's what I said, and I stand by that. And if you want to have a show on that where we can discuss that more in detail, we can take it from a secular or non-secular perspective. Either way, for me, it's fine. But I'm trying to tell you that that is the case. So there will not be any more great black movements to deal with anything. And for us to be wasting our time, if black women are driving this against white racism, white supremacy, white whatever, then that's a fool's errand. And this is what I think about the power that you're talking about that's now been bestowed in black women and how they think. Go ahead and go deal with white racism while
what
your
you're saying is
kids.
there will. I mean, at the end of the day, okay, this is March the 24th, 2021, I believe.
Yes, March 24th,
There
2021.
will be no more great. There will be
None,
no
Tom.
more great. Black
Not in my
movements
time,
like
not in
this.
your children's time,
Okay.
not in your
We will agree or
grandchildren's
disagree.
time.
We
There
will
won't
agree or
be any,
disagree on that
Tom.
one. No more great black movements.
There
in
will
America,
not, Tom.
period.
That is absolutely
And
correct.
it's because of the black woman. Is that what you're
It's
saying?
because, once again, Tom, I have to keep bringing you back to this.
Okay, bring me back to it.
From a spiritual perspective, those movements that you talked about were centered in God. God works through women to affect the hearts of men. That was a transition from the Old Testament into the New Testament. If you're paying it, I know pastors don't talk about this in church. They don't dare talk about it in church. They know the truth. They don't tell you the truth because most of them are doing the work for the devil anyway and just trying to make a living.
Wait a minute,
But
wait a minute. Who's doing the work of the devil?
these pastors who won't tell you the full truth. But Tom, I don't pass a collection plate around. I don't have anything to gain by telling you the truth. So I don't mind sharing the insight that I've gained. If a person want to argue against me, bring your pastor, bring your Bible, let's go at it, and we can go through verse by verse, and I can prove my case. But the point is that no, there will not be any more great black movements, period, because all those movements were fueled by black women who are grounded in God and allow God to work through them to fuel those movements, to motivate the men to go out there and do this. There are no mass movements.
And what you're saying is there are no black women out there who are grounded in God. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying no, there's none, Tom. I'm saying there are not enough to make a
How
difference.
many does it take, Jimmy?
Well, Tom, it takes enough to where it's noticeable, and it's not noticeable today. So there aren't very many. There's no all of anything when you're dealing with people. You know that, and Glenn always reminds us of that. So there is no all when it comes to people, but there are not enough.
Of course.
They're not enough that are doing it in order to make a difference, a noticeable difference.
I understand, Jimmy. What you do have to understand is that black women have always been the foundation of our movements.
Yes, they have, Tom.
Even though typically it has been a male face.
Yes, I agree with that, 100%.
And most of these women have typically never been acknowledged.
That is true, except on this show.
Making things happen. And so, is it possible that you're not noticing anything? Is because typically, Jimmy, they've never been noticed until.
Tom, we noticed them on this show. We've talked about them. We continue to acknowledge the contribution of black women, to the overall success of this country, to move a country, to get us in line, to be better as a nation, to want to be better. So we talked about this many times. You and I point this out.
And you're right. And Jimmy, I think that's part of what we have to understand and acknowledge is that what is news in America is not shaped by our community. And what is news in our community for a large part, is not shaped by our
Tom,
mass media, if we have such
we
a thing as
never
mass media.
controlled mass
And so
media
there we
before.
go, and that's the
And but
whole
we
point
were
that I'm
able
trying
to
to make here.
transform a nation, Tom,
I agree with
over
that.
many generations without control of mass media. So not having mass media and control of
What,
mass media is not a factor for us. You know what is a
Jimmy,
factor for us, Tom? Walking lockstep with God is a factor for us. When our movements are in sync with God, guess what? People are radiating, attracted to the radiation that is given off by those people. When you don't have that, when you have fake movements, you have to pay people. Black Lives Matter has to pay people for their movements because they're not centered around God as their movement. Anytime that you can't attract, your light cannot shine enough to attract people that are in the dark to what you're doing, that should let you know something. If you got to give money to people to be part of your movement, then that should let you know something, Tom. Our movements are not centered around us paying people. Dr. King wasn't lined up
who's
by the bridge handing out
Jimmy?
money.
Are you trying to Jimmy? Every movement has to pay bills.
Okay, Tom. All right.
Every movement has to pay bills.
Uh, Tom, you know what? Every movement has been able to, in the past, have been able to raise money. They use that
Of
money
course,
to bail
of
people out
course,
of jail,
of
to
course.
help people who have been adversely affected. It wasn't that I'm paying you to come to the march on Friday. There's a difference. So today, you pay people to go protest. You hand them money to go protest. Hey, there's a stack of bricks over there on 4th and 15th Street. Go over there and grab the bricks and start throwing them. There's some gasoline over here staged for you. Go go get that and burn your neighborhood down. There's some bats over there. Go grab those and then fight the cops in their riot gear. This is movements today, Tom. None of that is inspiring of people because none of it was centered in God. It's an insult today, Tom. It's an insult and affront to our ancestors and to God to even compare these fake, phony movements today with what people were doing, fighting for the heart and soul of a nation, and doing it using God as their spiritual source, compared to what is existing today. So, no, Tom, there won't be any more great movements unless we, as black people, go back to our roots and not turn back to the church, which has abandoned us today and is just a place as a profit center, but actually go back to our roots of using God as our spiritual inspiration to drive what we do in life. If you did that, we wouldn't let half of our black boys drop out of high school. We wouldn't let our girls go out and do the things they do in public and what's a good word, to disrespect themselves. We wouldn't have a society that feels that black people are not accomplishing anything or contributing anything because we would have people that were doing things that demonstrated, not just talked about, demonstrated their greatness. We don't have demonstrated greatness today, Tom. That's what you're not getting. All we're talking about is people of the past, our ancestors, of how great they were and what they did against
Right, Jimmy, but you have to
against
understand,
adverse.
just as then, there today is now our history. History is being made every day, and all I'm suggesting is this: if you're going to any movement is built around the foundation of inspiration and organization. And so the reality of it is, I can't disagree with you in terms of us talking from a historical perspective, because obviously that's the frame of reference that we have to use. But at the end of the day, when we talk about our legacy and our struggle in this country, it is going to be predicated upon the times. And what we are talking and what we are doing today will be looked at 10 years, 20
Tom,
years, 50
everything
years.
is
And, we're,
predicated on the
and,
times.
and they will be talking about our history, which
They
we are
will
making
not,
today.
Tom, because you know what? If you look back through history, everybody we've ever talked about on this show, our ancestors, they were impacting the times that they were living in at that time.
Correct.
You didn't have to necessarily wait 50 years to realize Dr. Charles Drew was great. You
Of
didn't have to,
course.
he was great during his time. So for you to say that somehow we have to now wait to
No, no,
look
no, no,
back
Jimmy.
on,
I didn't say wait. What I'm saying is everything that we are doing is looked at from a historical point of reference. It's not, but you have to remember, and people forget this. Even though we've always had great movements or powerful movements in this country, but the perspective often changes, Jimmy. What you have to understand is everybody didn't like Dr. King. Some people want him dead, even in our community. Everybody didn't like Malcolm X. So a lot of people want him dead, a lot of them in our community. So we look at it at a historical perspective. What we are doing today will be looked at, as I said, in 10 years, in 20 years, and there will be totally, the frame of reference will not change, but you'll be looking at it from a different lens. The
Tom,
same thing that we are talking about now, people were dealing with then, Jimmy. All I'm
Tom,
saying is this, and again,
historically, the historians who look back on this period are gonna look back at statements that LeBron James made in the Impact. You
okay,
know, foolish or correct in his statements in these fake movements. That's what they're going to look back on, Tom. There are no the greatness that you're talking about from people who were great during the time at the time that they were living doesn't exist today. The only people, only black folks making any kind of news who are doing anything worth talking about are these celebrity athletes. That's
and
it.
you know, and you want to know who shapes their image? Mass media, who isn't controlled by us. That's not
Tom, we've
coincidental.
never controlled mass media,
That
but that didn't stop us in the past.
but what I'm saying is, as a consumer, what I'm saying is this: as a consumer-driven economy, you cannot not acknowledge that there is. If we look at the '60s, it is not coincidental that everything was framed around Dr. King when Malcolm X came along because white folks were threatened by Malcolm X. And so they put all the attention to Dr. King. And so if you go back to the early part of the 20th century, when you look at whether it's Frederick Douglass during the latter half of the latter part of the 19th century, or you look at W.B. Du Bois, that exposure is shaped by another group. That's not the topic of this conversation, but all I'm saying is our historical lens changes over time. But getting back to the context of what we're talking about, we can agree to disagree that there
All
will
right.
never be another movement in America of significance as of this point in time moving
And
forward.
and why is that true, Tom?
It is because you're saying because of the flawed inspiration of black women that have been the centerpiece of our movement. And
Thank
I just,
you. Now you finally get it.
and I'm saying I wholeheartedly disagree, but you have a right to your opinion.
So
You have
now
a
you
right to your
finally get
opinion.
it, Tom. You're gonna see, Tom,
Because
that
exactly, I
okay.
wholeheartedly disagree, but we can agree to disagree.
Well, you know what? We may not be around when the final chapter is written by the historians on this point, but if we are still around, Tom, or if you're still around, then you're gonna look back and you're gonna say, you know, that Jimmy Stewart was correct.
No,
I couldn't
no.
see it at the time,
I could say that, but I
but
certainly hope not, Jimmy.
but it has proven to be true that
Because what,
he was
what you're
correct.
saying, Jimmy, is our greatest work is only behind us, and I do not believe that.
Rearview mirror, Tom.
No, no, sir.
And I hope things change, but that's going to take a spiritual revolution for it to change, a new spiritual renaissance that's not centered around the church, but centered around the message and the spirit and the wisdom of God to
I would
move
agree
our
with that.
people.
I would agree with that. It's all there, but at the end of the day, somebody has to do the work. And what I don't want to do
I've
is to
done the
say,
work, Tom.
what I'm
I'm
saying is,
sharing the inspiration.
what I'm gonna suggest is,
Go ahead.
it's not gonna all fall on black women.
No, it's not, Tom.
No,
Some of it's
that's not the
fallen
answer.
some of it's fallen on us, and
Some of it,
yeah, one of us has did some of the legwork to identify where we need to go. I'm putting a roadmap out there, Tom. You're not listening. You're rejecting what I'm
no, I'm
saying.
listening. No, no, no.
So so
I'm rejecting your outcome. Your outcome. No more movements in America. We might just pack our bags and move someplace else,
well,
Jimmy. If you're saying no other work is going to be done. No, you're not.
if
This is
we're
what
not going to get back in sync with God and use the motivation of God to drive our everyday life and what we do, then no, Tom, we won't.
okay. I'm not disagreeing with you on that principle, but what you're saying is black women,
Hmm.
if I'm interpreting this correctly, have completely lost their way because they are not grounded with God. And that is the reason why, one, we have nothing left.
That the good works that could have been done by men working through women by God, yeah, that process is broken now. So that would not happen now. That would not materialize. So that's not to say that men and women can't do good work. They can, but I'm saying that the new plan of the New Testament was that God was going to work on collectively this group that you're talking about, large number of men through women. That was going to be the process. Well, that process is broken now, so that's not going to happen. There will be some individual cases where people were doing good
What is
stuff, and
well, what is the fix in your opinion, Jimmy? What is the fix?
time for all of us to come together and commit our lives.
But you're saying it's women. So
No,
what's the
Tom, I
fix?
say I'm only explaining part of the process, part of it that they own and control. There are parts that we own. I said this time that there are roles. The Bible is very clear about roles in the Bible. Even though we're both equal, men and women are equal in the body of Christ in the church. But the Bible is very adamant about defining roles for us. We both have equal roles and responsibility. We have things that God wants us to do. We're talking about black women today. We could talk about black men later on, and we could talk about their roles and responsibility and what they're not doing. But this is not a case that I'm saying black men get a pass, and we're only blaming black women. That's not the
So
case.
what are you suggesting is black man's role? What are you suggesting is black
That
woman's
takes a
role?
whole another show
Keep it
time, and
simple.
we only have like 5 minutes
Well,
to the
keep it
top of the
simple.
hour.
You're an intelligent brother. Keep it simple and short.
Once again, we started our foundation. We're going back and looking at the roles that have been outlined and responsibilities have been outlined by the Bible for
So what
men
are the
and
top?
women.
What would be the top two roles of the black man? What are the top two roles of the black woman? And call it a wrap.
One of the roles, Tom, is for her to be the spiritual advisor, the confidant, the person who provides the wisdom to the head of her family, the leader of the family, which is the male. So the black man
So
should.
what you're saying
Hold
now
on,
is
Tom.
that
Let me get my two
the woman
things
is the
out.
spiritual advisor.
Let me get those two things out. She is the confidant. Yes, she's the one that you should confide in. She's the one that you should listen to, as your partner in life, and trust in in the things that she say. And not necessarily that you have to necessarily follow everything that she says, but you have to at least listen and consider it because she may be giving you information. Given inspired to her by God. So to cut her off and not listen is to cut God off. To
So
abuse.
Jimmy, isn't that the man's job to listen then?
Tom, I was pointing that out. You keep cutting me off. You asked me for two things from each, and as I got to one, you jump back in. So leadership and to listen on for your man. That's a good start, and to allow God to work through you by being a godly woman and provided the wisdom and inspiration that God provides you, to your man is the two things that we can start with women. So, but
Okay.
that's an oversimplification of a lot of
That
things.
wasn't simple enough. That was kind of complicated. So women are supposed to do. They're supposed to be the spiritual advisor. That's number one, and number
Not the
two is what?
spiritual advisor, Tom. They're to take their inspired wisdom that's given to them by God and to share that. This is why the Bible says that women should be known for being quiet. That means known outside of your household to the public that you're quiet. You listen, you observe, you pay attention to things that are going on. Your knucklehead husband, he's out there being a loudmouth. He's out there pounding his chest. He's out there doing the things, not paying attention. But it's up to you to help bring things, insight to him that he may not see. He may think he see everything and know everything, but surely that is not the case. So what is up? Yeah, it is your job to help him. And also it's your job to help inspire him to believe in himself when the rest of society is telling him that he can't do something. The devil is going to knock him down if he's trying to be a godly person. It's up to you to have that strength to help pick him up when no one else will. God has to work through you when your man is not in the word. He has to work through you to get to him. Without God working through you, there is no getting to him. He's just a knucklehead lost in the world. Period. I hate to be so blunt about it, but the Bible says what it says. We can debate whether we agree with it or not, but you can't debate what it says. But we can all open it up and read it for ourselves.
Gotcha. Well, Jimmy, I think that kind of closes our show. We're right at about an hour, and
Yes, we're a little bit
I
over.
presume we haven't been cut off.
No, we hadn't been cut off, man. We're
Okay.
we're good for an hour.
All
So with
right,
that
folks.
being
Well,
said, people, let's wrap up. Tom, you can close it out with a
all
prayer.
right. Well, we want to thank everyone for joining our show tonight. I hope you have found this conversation to be interesting, intriguing, and thought provoking. We want to thank everyone for joining us, as you will, every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Central Time. And thank you again for coming to share and listen with Black Men Speak. Father, we ask that you continue to bless us. We thank you for bringing us together again. We ask that you would continue to order our steps in your words and that you would continue to guide us on our day to day journey so we may understand and live your will in our lives. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, we're out. As soon as I can cut the stream off, we'll be out. But there is the